Welcome to Concussion Talk Podcast. I'm Nick Mercer. This is episode 60. Concussion Talk Podcast is presented by HeadCheck Health. HeadCheck Health bridges the gaps in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Track Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada, who rely on HeadCheck Health to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more. Okay, it's April 1st, 2020, and we have a very topical podcast today. And I also have my first co-host. And if you want to find out more about my co-host, you can listen to or visit episode 56. In the meantime, though, here's Charlotte to talk about herself and introduce our guest.
Great, thanks, Nick. I'm Charli Skinner, and as Nick mentioned, I spoke with him in the Concussion Talk podcast on episode 56, called Attitude After Brain Injury. I sustained a brain injury in September 2018 and have been living with a brain injury and chronic illness as a result of it ever since. So I'm currently dealing with recovery and treatment and all those kinds of things. So we're coming together today to talk about the issue of self-isolation, physical distancing, and brain injury in the context of the global pandemic of coronavirus. We're very lucky today to have Michelle McDonald with us, who is the Executive Director of Brain Injury Canada, to talk more about it. So, Michelle, I wondered, could you introduce yourself and briefly describe what you do with Brain Injury Canada?
Sure. Thank you, Nick and Charli, for having me. And thanks for all the work that you both are doing to raise awareness and education about brain injury. So as you said, I'm the Executive Director of Brain Injury Canada. I started in this role in 2017 and have been working with the board of directors and the staff and volunteers to grow the organization in reach, revenue, and impact. I've been working in the brain injury sector for over 10 years at both the local level as the Executive Director of the Brain Injury Society of Toronto, which is a community association in Toronto, and now at the national level. I live in Ottawa and with my kids, my husband, and my dog and my cat.
Amazing. Well, it's great to have you, and it's going to be really interesting to get your perspective, given your experience from all sorts of different levels of working with brain injury. Essentially, it's pretty clear that we're living in a very unprecedented time as our global situation. The whole world is facing isolation. A large proportion of the world's government have enforced very strict guidelines for staying at home and no social contact. But this is something I think that people with brain injury are quite familiar with. Isolation is something that we're very used to, particularly in the perhaps earlier stages of recovery. And obviously, some people will live with it for the rest of their lives. So it would be good today to talk about a combination of issues, including how to cope with isolation, how this kind of situation affects people with brain injury, and what we can do as a community to help raise awareness of brain injury and the support for those most in need, particularly in this very unprecedented global situation. So I wondered, firstly, Michelle, if you could talk a bit about how the isolation affects people with brain injury, more specifically in terms of the global context of the coronavirus pandemic, and then more specifically as well in terms of dealing with isolation and the lack of access to possible medical treatment or community support that might be resulting as a result of these quite strict guidelines that are in place. And it would be great to hear what kind of things Brain Injury Canada is doing at the moment to address these kinds of issues.
Sure. Well, there's a lot to cover there. So as you mentioned, these are unprecedented times. And for many people in Canada, they've never experienced anything like this. But as you also said, that for people living with brain injury, this is not all that uncommon to be isolated. The physical, the sensory, emotional issues, fatigue make it challenging for those with brain injury to participate in everyday society. And not to mention, there's physical barriers as well. So for many people living with acquired brain injury, isolation is an everyday challenge. It can be stressful and lonely. And now, the general public is seeing what it feels like for what it feels like to live like that. So the world is, we're all shifting and trying to stabilize and move everything to virtual. So there's lots of, community associations that are moving their programs online, whether they're having virtual support groups. They're doing, increasing their phone lines, that in-person phone support, or the peer mentoring. They're increasing those. But that's still a bit of a challenge for those with brain injury because of the sensory issues. Computers, online access, it can be a challenge in the cognitive fatigue, the visual issues. So it's not quite a solution. And yes, the people who had consistent physiotherapy or occupational therapy or were going to centers, or had people coming into their home, not really wanting to, put themselves at risk by having people come into their home who might be carrying the virus. But does does that outweigh the need to continue with their treatment? So people need to work with their service providers to ensure that they're taking the necessary precautions. If there is ways to do it virtually, we know that people with brain injury have an increase. Many have compromised immune systems, so they're at a higher increased risk for the virus, and for poorer outcomes so it's working with the service providers, looking at in the individual situation, not looking at the group as a whole of how can we solve this for everyone, but each person has their own situation, and so looking at it from that context. And then I think it also should be appreciated and understood that whenever a few weeks, a few months, I think is probably more likely a few months, when this social isolation or physical distancing is not a problem, and we move back into more normal participation, that we don't forget that those with brain injury can't be left behind. We've experienced what it feels like for those, so let's be better as a society going forward to make sure that they're not feeling isolated. And just because we're all allowed to go out again, but we need to make sure that they feel participated, engaged, and valued in their communities. So there's a lot to cover there, but each person has their own situation. So I think that can't be emphasized enough, that it needs to be looked at their own personal context.
Great. Well, then I still have a question kind of following up to that. Yeah, when everyone does get back to normal as normal can be, but normal situation. In the meantime, do you have any coping mechanisms for people in general, and specifically for people with brain injury? Coping mechanisms for self-isolation now, or physical distancing now, that people can use?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a huge mental health component to this, and there, it's the isolation, fear, anxiety, and the unknown of how long this will go on and what the world will look like when this is over. So it's important that people take care of themselves, whether you have a brain injury, whether you don't have a brain injury. So there's a few things that people can do. And one of them is take breaks from watching the news. It's, the CTV has its own 24-hour news channel. CNN in the US, if you go onto any news station, the top 10 stories are about COVID-19 or coronavirus or the pandemic. So we need to take breaks from that. It's not good for us to fixate, and it's important to stay informed, but not to the point of being completely overwhelmed by the situation. And it's also important to get your information from the proper sources. I can't emphasize that enough. There's a lot of fear mongering, so that can lead to more anxiety and fear. So it's crucial to get information from reputable sources such as Public Health Agency of Canada, the World Health Organization, the Center for Disease Control in the US. So also make sure you're eating healthily. So a good balance of fruits, vegetables, carbs, and proteins. It's easy to just fall into that, I'm stuck inside, I'm in front of the TV, and I'm going to eat chips and whatever other carb, but it's really not good for us, and it's not good for our bodies or our mental health. It's also important to get some exercise every day. So doing it to your ability. So some people may have been used to going to the gym or going to meet with their physical therapist or for exercise. So you can still go out for a walk as long as you practice a social, appropriate physical distancing. And there's lots of low impact workouts online. But I think it's also emphasized for those with brain injury, you need to make sure that you're not doing more than you can handle physically, or that will further worsen or aggravate your symptoms. And another really important, be social. And for those who have sensory issues and can't be online for long periods of time, this can be a challenge. But FaceTime, Zoom, House Party, there's so many options to keep you connected. So even if it's, you're only able to do 10 minutes, talk to someone online for 10 minutes, see a friendly face, and joke. And don't talk about the pandemic, talk about whatever, your pets, a TV show you watched, but, keep that social contact open. And then try to create some structure for the day. It's easy to lose all semblance of routine, but routine helps us maintain good mental health. I know with my kids, we're trying to create a structure, because if we don't, then they just go from TV to device to a nap. And so we're trying to fit in time so that they can look at the clock and go, okay, it's 10 o'clock. I'm supposed to be going to play basketball outside, or, doing whatever. I'm going to do an art project. So I think we all need routine to keep us structured. But it's good for our mental health and our brains. And then also for those, don't be afraid to reach out to anyone. If you are feeling sad and lonely, reach out to a loved one, a friend, or for those with brain injury, there's your local brain injury association. Many are taking calls now, doing one-on-one support. They've set up support groups online. So people shouldn't feel afraid to reach out. This is hard on everyone. So there should be no stigma around saying I've got cabin fever, I'm feeling anxious. Reach out to people that can help you through it.
That's great.
So there's a lot of things that you can do, but it's easy to just sit. So people really have to try and motivate themselves and motivate each other.
Yeah. And I think I've seen on Brain Injury Canada that you guys have set up some stuff where people can engage directly. Would you be able to talk a bit about that? I think I've seen there's a challenge schedule and some social media related community stuff.
Yeah, well, we found at the start of this that there was, lots of people were offering, online things. And so what we did is we put together it's 30 activities that you can do. We sort of consolidated all that stuff that we were seeing on social media. So it covers things like, education, cooking. So it's a list you can find it on our website, braininjurycanada.ca. There's a whole COVID section, or COVID-19 coronavirus section on our homepage. That has information about different activities, and you can tour art galleries. But what we did is we took all this information and consolidated it into one place. We're continually adding to it for people, so that they can go and look for a new activity every day. But then you also mentioned the challenge. So we've launched a weekly challenge to help people look for ways to get involved while at home. So this week is a new recipe challenge. And we are encouraging people to try something new. Last night, I tried to make rolls and forgot to add the yeast. So we had little dough balls. I was going to take a photo and post it on it, but I was embarrassed for forgetting probably the most essential. But we're really trying to engage people. So we're, if you do a recipe, tag us on Facebook or Twitter, and we'll share it. We shared a picture yesterday of a group.
Do you have a hashtag people can tag you with?
It's hashtag together apart is what we're using. And our Twitter thing is at braininjury_can. Okay. So, and people can find our Facebook and our Twitter on our website. But we're really trying to engage people with others. We're all in this together, so let's all share what each other's doing and have a little bit of a laugh. And so we're doing that every week for the next 12 weeks. And so even if this clears up, we still want to engage people. So we're also continuing to foster collaboration with other brain injury associations. So there's so much fabulous work that they're doing. So we're really trying to share what they're doing, create sort of a network of activity and cohesion across Canada. So people can connect with us, but then also connect with their local brain injury association.
That's brilliant. So it's interesting you talked a bit about the community and expanding in terms of connection with other brain injury associations, but also the fact that this period of time is a very interesting one for people who are living with brain injury. I know from my own perspective, I can say that seeing other people who have not lived with injury or disability or chronic illness, now recognizing the kinds of things that the kinds of ways that life is like when you are dealing with this kind of stuff is a very interesting experience. It creates a certain sense of solidarity, which I think is really important for, it makes you feel, as someone who is recovering from brain injury or who's living with brain injury, as though people are understanding your situation more. And I think this kind of situation can help us as a community raise awareness, not only within the community, but also to others outside the community, so that they can understand more about what it's like to live with brain injury, chronic illness or disability. So I wondered if you could talk about that kind of outreach and how this situation could, lead to the good of actually hopefully fostering the messages and the awareness that associations like yours are trying to do.
Yeah, I think, using this as an opportunity to educate in a positive way. So instead of saying how you now see how we feel, saying this is what our everyday life is like for someone living with a brain injury. So using this as an opportunity to educate, so that when we come out of this, we're more aware as a society. And it's not just brain injury, it's just disability in general, as you mentioned, chronic illness. So how can we use this learning to affect change in society? And so I know that there's lots of research being done, but there's also lots of research around or proposals that I've seen going in about for in the future, how can we, because this may not be the last pandemic. I'm not a future fortune teller, but from what I've been reading. So how can we better prepare in the future and use these learnings to affect change so that, first of all, people with brain injury and other chronic illness and disability don't feel segregated from society going forward? But then how also can we prepare those, for the future if this happens again? One of the things that I do want to touch on is the invisible nature of brain injury. So we've been hearing lots about seniors being able to go to the grocery stores, an hour earlier than opening. They have seniors hours. But many people with brain injury, as I mentioned, also have compromised immune systems. So they should be able to take advantage of these these calming, lower, decreased population hours. It's also the sensory overload of being in a grocery store. There's lights, there's, lots of people. There's some grocery stores have very rigid rules now, but then there's some where it's still very busy for social distancing, or physical distancing. So being aware that there's an invisible nature to some disabilities and accommodating that. So, if people need to call your grocery store ahead of a time and explain your situation and say, I have a brain injury, I have a compromised immune system, can I come during seniors hours? Order online or ask a family member, a friend to order your groceries. But using this as an opportunity to educate about the invisible nature of brain injury and other disabilities, I think is really important.
Yeah, no, that's, I totally completely agree, obviously. I liked your point earlier about making sure you stay social. I know it's just called physical distancing, which people have taken to be social distancing, but it's just physical. And just try to stay in touch with people the best you can using technology now we have available. And for example, on note tomorrow, actually on episode 58, I talked to brain injury McGill Concussion Montreal, which is McGill's concussion group. And I spoke at their concussion. I was at their concussion group meeting last week, and then this week, or 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Last week, sorry. And this week, tomorrow, I'll be speaking, which is Thursday, April 2nd. I'll be speaking to the group of the Concussion Montreal, McGill's concussion group, support meeting tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. And it's like the idea of staying social. And I was going to ask you something else about about it. So in terms of that, I know you're obviously speaking out about this, and what kind of answer questions or issues are raised with you as in terms of emails you get, or your emails, or you hear from major people or range organizations around the country. Brain Injury Canada. What kind of people? What are you hearing about now about just social distancing, physical distancing, that whole thing? Like, are you getting any sort of feedback about how this? About how difficult it is, or?
Yeah, I think, well, some of the questions that we've been getting have been around having care providers come into homes and the precautions around that. And I think it's also that people need to understand that this, it's only been about 3 weeks since the more stringent social physical distancing rules went into place. So a lot of organizations that offer in-home care service have had to stabilize and sort of really shift gears and figure out how can they offer the same level of service from a distance. And so I think we need to be patient while these companies sort of shift gears, figure out how to offer the same services. And then also use protective gear, educate their staff about how to appropriately interact with their clients in their home, and proper protective equipment, but then also washing hands and contacting. And then also people need to understand how to disinfect after someone leaves. So how to, you disinfect the door, you disinfect. What we've been telling people is if you have some concerns about having people into your home, talk to the care provider, talk to, the organization, educate yourself on proper disinfecting techniques. So Public Health Agency of Canada has lots of information. We've released an article sort of explaining, putting COVID-19 into plain language. There's a lot of really technical terms. Flatten the curve seems to be, the new buzzword, which is really important, but it's not we need to understand what that actually means. So we created an article that sort of was an FAQ, a frequently asked questions about COVID, because that's what we've also been getting is some questions about where can I find funding. So we're trying to share resources that have already been established. There was a professor at Carleton University that released a plain language breakdown of all the government subsidies that are now available due to this pandemic. And puts in plain language, and questions or sort of situations. I'm a mother. I can no longer work. And my kids are at home. What subsidies are available to me? This professor really puts it into context for people. And then the other questions that we've been getting is what does this mean for us? And so what we've been saying to people is contact your local brain injury association, see what services are being offered. A lot are, increasing their online presence to be able to continue to offer supports and services. So they're doing webinars, they're doing online support groups. So really trying to connect people with their local association because they're the feet on the grounds in Canada. The questions have been, I think, we're not Public Health Canada, so we're not able to answer medical questions but we try to be a connector and connect people to information and resources within their community. But I can't speak to what other associations, what the questions they're getting. But I'm sure they're getting a lot of similar calls about, lack of services. But this is an unprecedented situation. So we sort of have to be patient while we stabilize and figure out our way through if this is going to last for months.
It really is, yeah. And thank that was definitely very inclusive of all the topics. And I don't want to kind of hog Charlotte's we agreed to alternate questions, and I don't know if Charlotte wants to ask the next question.
I think, it would just be great to, Michelle, thanks so much for covering so many interesting topics. There's obviously a lot even within that we could delve a lot deeper into, but you've given us a really good overview of what you can do when as someone who's listening to this, who has a brain injury, perhaps also as a carer who might be looking to get support or go find different routes for new means of getting the things that people really need right now. So I guess, Michelle, just to kind of finish off, it would be great if you had any sort of final words of advice or words of wisdom for people with brain injury? Just kind of your main message to bring across to people.
Yeah, well, this does seem like a very dark and scary time, but we do have to look at the positives. So we live in a time where technology and social media can keep us connected. We can still get outside and holler and shout at our neighbor across the street. We are able to, we are not running out of toilet paper.
No.
But we can get family and friends to pick up groceries, or count on family and friends to pick up the phone and check in and see if people are okay. And the globe has really come together with this, looking at the positive of, how this isn't just happening to one country. It did feel back in January where this was just happening in China, but it is all, I think the count today is 180 countries. So there's very few spots on the earth that is not touched by this. Yeah. So this will create change. And I think we really have to look at, the positives of, we always say to, our kids, look to the helpers. So we can look at those that are helping us, the nurses and doctors, that are, the grocery store workers. They're essential workers now. Someone working at Walmart, we can place importance on so many people in this. And, for those with brain injury, stay connected. There are activities. We're going to be doing a video challenge. We want to hear from people with brain injury. So we're going to we'll launch it on our social media. But we really want to show that, this isn't getting the brain injury community down. We're connected. So how are people with brain injury coping with this? So whether it's, that they're playing with their animals more, or whatever they do from home, doing a puzzle, or we want to know that, this is together apart, and this is happening across Canada, but we're all still in this together. I think for everyone, this will pass. We just have to be patient and be there for each other any way we can. And right now, the best way we can do that is by staying home and making sure that no one's forgotten in this. And I think that has to be the outcome after this, that we don't leave people behind once we are all able to move on, that we're making sure that those with brain injury and other disabilities continue to feel supported and engaged by their communities.
Great. No, I think that's an excellent point, that just because, hopefully one thing that comes out of this is that just because you don't see people, you don't forget about them. People there's still issues. Just because you don't see people, there's still something to be taken from that. Just as that they are still there, and they do still have issues they're dealing with, just as you don't see them every day. But you were mentioning all the social media accounts and activities that are available. So would you like to just mention not your personally, but Brain Injury Canada's social media accounts and any other accounts or any other social media online activities that people should look at?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we have Facebook. It's Brain Injury Canada. We also have Twitter. So at Brain Injury _can. And we also have LinkedIn. And so we'll be sharing as much as we can other, I don't want to name just a few, the associations, because that would, there's so many that are doing great work. So I don't want to just highlight a few. So, but what we're trying to do on our social media is share what everyone's doing. So if people come to ours, we have the Cross Canada Snapshot, and we're trying to show, use tools that other people are using. One of the associations is doing a webinar on fraud at this time. There's lots of, it's despicable that people are taking advantage of this situation. But how can we all learn what are those situations, those fraud, activities that are happening, and how can we avoid them? So that's not something that's just specific to that community association. That information is important to all of Canada. So we'll be sharing that once they post the recording. So there's so much great work being done. And our goal for the next however long is to share that as it relates to COVID. We always do this, but as it relates to COVID, how do we share that information, and how do we share the supports that are happening that can benefit everyone? And we'll be using the learnings from this in June is Brain Injury Awareness Month. And so a lot of the community associations do in-person events, and we've all had to shift gears and figure out how can we offer the same level of awareness online. So we're working together across Canada to create an online campaign, but then also use this topic of isolation now, but then also in the future, how do we create awareness of, okay, well, general public is isolated now. Well, this is what it's like for everyone, as we mentioned, or this is what it's like for those living with brain injury. So how can we decrease that in the future? So that'll be a topic of Brain Injury Awareness Month in June as well.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. These are just, there's so much, like as Charlotte's mentioned before, there's so much to unpack there, and help people visit your website, your social media, your Facebook, your Twitter, your LinkedIn, everything to Brain Injury Canada, and reach out to your own provincial, or regional, or city organization. And Brain, if you're having issues, then please just find us close to you and reach out to friends and family and people who maybe will help you. And I think that's it for me. Charlotte, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask? And in the meantime, also, Charlotte, thank you so much for being a great co-host and probably a better host than me even. But you're thanks so much, and thank you also, Michelle. And Charlotte may have some other questions to ask. I'm not sure, but
no, I think that was really great, Michelle. You've given us so much useful information, and yeah, as Nick said, people can continue to follow all the social media stuff and stay connected. And all of this stuff will still apply when this is slowing down and when it's all over. So that's just something for everyone to bear in mind. So yeah, thank you both very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. We're all in this together now and after. But to you both, keep up the great work and stay healthy.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks a lot. And thank you, Charli. Not Charlotte. Charli. You like Charli better than Charlotte, don't you? Okay, thanks. Well, thanks both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As mentioned, you can find Brain Injury Canada online on the website and on the social media accounts. And if you're not in Canada, or if you are, please visit your own local brain injury community organization. And if you're looking for other information, please visit your national organization who may have information for you. You can visit me online at concussiontalk.com or go to my social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Concussion Talk. As always, music at the beginning of this show is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.